His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine a national homeland for Jews. So they already knew Palestine existed. That's how they identified they wanted to go to Palestine, because it was there. It was a real place, unlike Narnia. But here is the key. The British Empire never said a state. They said a homeland. Just think about this. That's why I'm saying that the devil takes notes when Britain is talking. Because, can someone please here tell me, any lawyers here? A lawyer. 2 lawyers. All right, look, I might get arrested on my way out, so I'm going to need your help. Can you please tell me, just from your legal expertise, if I tell you there's a place called Palestine with 1 million people, I'm going to give you a homeland in Palestine on top of that land that is already owned by people. And when I do that, just make sure you do not prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities. Does that make sense? I'm going to give you a homeland on somebody else's land, which is going to necessitate massacres and ethnic cleansing. But when I give you this homeland, just don't hurt anybody when you get it.
Well, I mean, it doesn't say homeland, it says home.
A home, yes, a home or a homeland.
But that's obviously it's prejudicial. It's of course it's prejudicial, because
Yes.
in order to give something, somebody has to displace somebody else.
Yes.
But it is a home, it's not established in the state.
It's like,
And so,
we didn't do it, right?
So it's very open drafting as to what that means. And when it says best endeavours, that's very specific legal drafting as well. Those words are very specific.
That's why I like talking to lawyers. Exactly. Just take the Cayman and build a home here, but don't prejudice, to the best of your ability, to the best of your endeavors, don't prejudice anyone. And I love that wording.
When it says it will establish, like use their best endeavours to establish, not use their best endeavours not to prejudice. And to use best endeavours is very specific wording. It means they can't be sued if they don't. They just have to prove that they use best endeavours.
So then the Zionists can't go back. So what the British Empire is doing is they're covering their own behinds by saying, we're going to try our best to give you this homeland, but don't hold us to it. Is that the legal interpretation?
It's not don't hold us to it, it's that it can't be enforced if it's best endeavours.
All right. See, that's why I like talking to lawyers. Every day you learn something new about the Balfour Declaration, which is over 100 years ago.
You use it when you're talking about third parties. I'm a divorce lawyer. So let's say if somebody says they're going to take over a mortgage in a divorce order, you're going to say that they use their best endeavours to ensure that they take the mortgage over, because it's dependent upon a third party. Like the bank can still say no.
Yes.
So you have to show best endeavours. You have to show them both the letter and provide them the details and so on. If ultimately the bank don't give you the mortgage, there's nothing you can do about it.
All right.
And everybody's still stuck with the mortgage. That's what best endeavours means. It's usually when you're buying a third party.
And do you concur, sir? Do you agree? Do you agree with that analysis? I'm joking.
But the sad thing is we're talking about human beings.
Yes, yes. And it gets even worse. So the question is, now we know who. We talked about Zionists. Why did they start the Zionist organization? Why they started pressuring Great Britain to give them some sort of homeland. The question becomes, why did they sign it in the first place? Does anyone know? Why does Britain even care about this Zionist organization, about Palestine, or about the Rothschilds? They lobbied enough. Yeah. They're the oldest and richest banking dynasty known to mankind. Yes. And also, who here has heard of Chaim Weizmann? Chaim Weizmann. But Chaim Weizmann was a Jewish scientist who lived in the British Empire in Great Britain. And this is very important. What do you need a lot of during World War I? Bombs. And the British did not have enough bombs, and they needed some sort of technology to suddenly triple, quadruple, 100 times their bomb manufacturing capabilities. And who had that solution? Weizmann. Chaim Weizmann, who was the president of the World Zionist Organization. And what he said was, look, I have a patent to acetone. I can manufacture all the bombs you want, but you got to give me one thing. Palestine. And he was already a billionaire. He's like, you can't pay me enough money to care about your war, but what you can do is give me Palestine. And there's a lot of other theories as to why they signed it, but that was one of the main ones. Another one some people point to is Lloyd George, the prime minister of Britain at that point, was also an evangelical Christian who believed that all Jews had to go back to the Holy Land so the Messiah could return and bring about Armageddon and Judgment Day. So there's a lot of moving parts here. One person opposed the Balfour Declaration. One person in the cabinet of, I think it was like six ministers. One cabinet member opposed the Balfour Declaration. Does anyone know his name? What was his name? No. All right. Forget his name. Even easier. What religion did he follow? Judaism. Yes. I'm going to give you this one. Oh, there you go. The one man who opposed this entire thing, Sir Edmund Montagu. The one Jewish cabinet member. And he opposed this whole Zionist plan of colonizing Palestine. And he gave 3 reasons. He said, number 1, that is anti-Semitic. What you are doing is you are giving Europe, that has a Jewish problem, who is just waiting for an opportunity to get rid of their Jewish populations. The moment you create a homeland for Jews elsewhere, they will have a reason to kick out all their Jewish populations. And that is anti-Jewish. So no, I'm not voting for this. Number 2, he said, you will be creating enemies for us as Jews in places we don't have enemies. What does that mean? In Muslim lands, in Yemen, in Egypt, in Morocco, in Lebanon. These countries and Yemen had some of the largest Jewish populations. The largest Jewish populations in Muslim lands. And they were all living peacefully. And who knows this? Edwin Montagu. And he said, if you end up ethnically cleansing and genociding hundreds of thousands of people to create a homeland for European Jews, you are going to cause issues for Jews everywhere else. So don't do it. And he said, number 3, only the Messiah can return and give the Jews the Holy Land. Because many Jews believe that upon the return of their Messiah, then they will return to the Holy Land. But until the Messiah returns, they cannot go back. And he said, Lloyd George, Arthur Balfour, the Rothschilds, none of you are the Messiah. So I am not voting for this declaration. And the British said, oh, bloody hell, and they signed it anyways. And unfortunately, how much time do I have to? I can wrap it up in 5 minutes before Maghrib time, before prayer time. Unfortunately, it just went downhill from there. World War I ended. Everyone wanted their independence. Palestine, as you can see, this was the 1899 article in the newspaper about we will colonize Palestine. So right now, a lot of people will say, no, Israel's not settled colonialism. We're just returning to our indigenous land. but that's literally how it was advertised for almost 100 years. World War I ends. Great Britain goes, oh, right, we gotta we made a bunch of agreements and we backpedaled on a bunch of them and we betrayed a bunch of people. Anyways, we'll figure this out. So Palestinians come and say, hey, we want our independence. So Britain says, oh, funny story, we kind of promised your land to somebody else. So we're gonna give you a mandate of Palestine. In 20 years, 30 years, you'll get your independence. You'll work for it. Zionist organization said, hey, you promised us Palestine. They said, hey, don't worry about it. To the best of our abilities, right? Best endeavors. We're working on it. We got you. So they look at the demographics of Palestine. Palestinians at that point were 85% Muslim, about 14.5% Christian, and 0.5% Jewish. So Great Britain looks at this and says, well, that's not going to work out. We need to bring those Jewish numbers up to create a homeland in Palestine. Well, where are we going to get all these Jews? Well, Europe has a Jewish problem. So now we're going to start mass immigration of Jews in the tens of thousands to Palestine, a land they've never been to. They don't speak the language. Many of them probably don't even follow any of the three religions. But we're going to do it anyways because to the best of our endeavors. And before they did that, this happened. The King Crane Commission. Any Americans here? Yeah, we got one brother right there. All right. Believe it or not, the US was against this plan. The US sent a delegation known as the King Crane Commission, and they said, guys, before you cause this mess, give us a few months. Let us investigate ourselves. And they went and investigated around Palestine. Can we realistically create a Jewish home on top of Palestine, separate from Palestinians, from society, without infringing on the rights and the lives of these people? They came back and said, don't do it. You're going to cause chaos, bloodshed. Don't do it. And Great Britain said, all right, bloody hell, we're going to do it. Sold. And they did it. They brought in hundreds of thousands of European Jews over a 20-year period, give or take. Hundreds of thousands of people from Europe to a land they've never been, a language they don't speak. And these people have been promised a home, not to live in this place, to own this place. So what did they start doing? They started creating militias, the Hajana, the Lehi, the Irgun gang, terrorist cells, and they started committing terrorist attacks all across Palestine on Palestinians and on British military personnel. And it got so bad that Great Britain in 1936 saw that the Palestinian strike took place. Palestinians stood up and they peacefully protested and they said, we are not going to accept this. We see what you're doing. You're bringing hundreds of thousands of people to our country, not to live with us, to take over from us. They're stealing our land. They're settling on our land. They're taking our resources. So Great Britain said, I hear you. Peel Commission, they investigated. 1939, they made a decision. We're going to stop mass immigration. We're going to stop settler colonialism of Palestine. We're going to slow it down just so you guys can breathe. Who didn't like this strategy? The Zionists. Hajana, Lehi, Irgun. The gang started committing terrorist attacks against British military personnel. And it got so bad that at one point, the British were fed up. They've had it. Zionism was still not very popular, but they're bringing in all the European Jews until World War II and the Holocaust. Once the Holocaust took place, Zionism went, whew, thank the Lord. Now every Jew everywhere will have to come to Israel because now we can tell them they're not safe anywhere. And they used the Holocaust to bring in even more Jews, not only from Eastern Europe at this point, but from the Middle East as well. And they kept bringing in mass immigration of Jewish populations until that number went from 0.5% Jewish to over 30% in 20 years. None of them Arab, none of them really Semitic, most of them European. By 1946, Great Britain was done. They were tired. And they just needed one last straw. The King David Hotel bombing. The Hajana, the Irgun, the Lehigh, the Zionist Jewish terrorist militias bombed a hotel that had Palestinian and British government officials and military personnel. And Britain said, we're done. We don't care. To the best of our endeavors, we're done. They went to the League of Nations and said, hey guys, you're going to be called the UN very soon. Figure this out. We created a mess. We want you guys to figure out how to resolve this Palestine mandate of Palestine issue. But before you do, there's one thing you need to know. There's about 50,000 terrorists known as the Hajana, the Lehigh, and the Irgun. They have stolen British weapons and they have been killing Palestinians and British personnel alike. If you don't disarm them before you create whatever solution you want, they will literally cause massacres. Anyways, it's tea time, and they peaced out. Did the UN dismantle the 50,000 terrorist militias? How many people here think they did? Obviously not. What happened when the UN said, we failed at grade 2 math, so we're going to give the minority Jewish population 55% of the land in the partition and give the majority Muslim Christian population 40% of the land? Because math, right? What happened to the Palestinians, the Muslims and the Christians living on that land that they had to now vacate? When you have 50,000 terrorists, according to Britain, heavily armed, and if not dealt with, they will cause genocide. What happened in 1948? Who knows what it's called? The Nakba, the mass catastrophe. 1948, over 700,000 Palestinians were kicked out of their homes, my grandfather included, when he was just about 5 years old. And he went to the Gaza Strip as a refugee. And those were the lucky ones. Over 10,000 Palestinians were genocided. Hundreds of villages and towns leveled to the ground.
Can I just ask you a question?
Yes.
The Palestinians who were allowed to remain become described as Israeli Arabs, how were they allowed to stay?
There's a lot more history into that one, but the vast majority, not all villages were destroyed. Some were just taken over and occupied, and they just essentially became citizens once the state of Israel was created. But the vast majority of Palestinians had to be ethnically cleansed. Why'd they let a few Palestinians stay? Freedom and democracy, right? But why didn't they just say, okay, we're taking this land, you Palestinians can stay in what is now Israel, but we're just gonna call it Israel now. Why did they have to ethnically cleanse them, genocide them? They literally have a book called Plan Dalit, which was a military plan on how to murder, how to sexually assault and torture Palestinians, so much so that they would have no choice but to leave their land. It's enshrined in a book. Why'd they have to ethnically cleanse them?
Because they would keep rebelling.
They would keep rebelling. True. But let's say they didn't. Let's say they said, no, we'll stay here. We'll be, sure, we're not going to rebel, and just give us equal rights.
They wanted to be pure Jew.
No, but their identity.
And they wanted to be pure
They
Jew.
wanted to have a Jewish identity.
Yes. What is Zionism?
Stuff in the Jewish state.
Yes. So the whole premise of Zionism is a Jewish supremacist, ethno-nationalist state. It has to be a majority Jewish population. Even according to the Jewish Agency and leaked minutes that they had, they would tell them even an 80% majority is not large enough.
Well, brother, we see that same narrative right now.
Yes.
They're repeating the same narrative, but in a much more harsher way, actually.
Mm-hmm. And that's why right now, what was that? Oh, it's Salah time, right?
Finish this time.
All right, so let me wrap this one up quickly. We'll pray and then we'll return. And exactly that. That's something we'll talk about right after. And that's why when you look at the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, they're occupied, but Israel refuses to do this thing called the one-state solution. They prefer to occupy Palestinian territories indefinitely because the moment they make a one-state solution, the majority is no longer there. Because now you would have 6 million Palestinians, 6 million Jews, and it's no longer the Zionist plan of a Jewish nationalist state. But long story short, this is the regression of Palestinian land since before 1948, the UN partition, and ever since, Israel has simply been taking more and more and more land. What was that? Today, I'll give you a clue. It's more like this, unfortunately. So I'm going to end off with 4 slides that I'm not even going to talk about. I just want you to read. And then we're going to pause for the sunset prayer. Whenever Israeli representatives say, we're just defending ourselves, we're bombing Lebanon and Gaza and the West Bank and Iran and Syria and your mother and your father because it's self-defense and we're peaceful people and we're indigenous. And you're anti-Semitic if you think otherwise. You know who doesn't believe that? Themselves. So I'm going to give you the first quote from Golda Meir, the former Israeli prime minister. I just want that to marinate, like the kind of mentality that you have to have. I did this at a Catholic school once to high school students. And when they read that, they all just went, what the hell's wrong with her? Who could think of something like that? Well, Zionists. Ben Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel. Gaslighting. There you go. Ben Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel. He was part of the Haganah, the Irgun, the terrorist militias. They know. They know. Vladimir Jabotinsky. He's the founder of revisionist Zionism, which means in order to have a Jewish homeland, it has to be almost 100% Jewish. You have to ethnically cleanse everyone who isn't Jewish. That was his agenda. Look at what he says. And what I love is the second word, native. He refers to Palestinians as what? Natives. He didn't claim to be indigenous to Palestine 3,000 years ago. He didn't invoke the Old Testament and the Bible. He said, any native people will oppose their colonizers, their new masters, and we're there to colonize them. And almost second to last, this is the former head of Shin Bet, the domestic intelligence agency in Israel that is supposed to figure out ways to continue oppressing Palestinian voices. The man literally said, if I was Palestinian, I would do exactly what the Palestinians are doing. And this man was responsible for suppressing Palestinians. And now, this last slide, good thing we got 2 lawyers. Ahmed Yassin is the founder of the Hamas movement. And I want you to compare all of what you've read to this crazy man's statement, who's hell-bent on killing every Jew, right? Or as we're being told. Every Palestinian resistance movement has had the same message. It didn't matter if it was Fatah, if it was the PLO, if it was the PFLP, if they were Muslims or Christians. It didn't matter what the resistance group was. They all had the same message. We don't care that they're Jewish. We're not fighting them because they're Jewish. We're fighting them because they're taking our land. And if my own brother, who's of my same religion, tried to take my land, I would fight him too. It's an independence movement, which is the internationally recognized right of an oppressed people to resist your colonizers, to resist your oppressors. So compare that with everything else we just read today. So right now we're going to take a 5 to 10 minute pause, pray for the sunset prayer right now for Maghrib, and then once we return, I think we'll have another 15, 20 minutes to just talk about global activism and what has been the result of global activism in the past 20 months.
There's some snacks at the back. Anyone, you're all welcome to go and help yourself. The rest of us will be praying. You can bring some snacks. You can sit back down.
Oh, nice.
We'll be back in 10 minutes.
All right, we'll see you all in a few minutes. Just turn this off. Or do you need it for Salah? تفضل الله. وعليكم السلام. جزاك الله خير. الله يفيدك يعني ميزان حسنات.
هذه زوجتي هديلة.
فرصة سعيدة، شرفتنا. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. سبحان ربي العظيم. سبحان ربي العظيم. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم. سبحان ربي العظيم. سبحان ربي. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. سمع الله. صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى
Yes.
time to break our fast.
Yes.
Inshallah. I'm good, Jazakallah khair. After inshallah. Thank you. Just gonna get a napkin. Jazakallah. Take that. قبل الله.
How long we got left?
Probably 15 minutes or so. And then just let everyone go and get some food.
Yeah, we were open to take it and then they can come and speak and do the fundraising and stuff.
Yeah, we can do that as well. I think my coffee's up there actually. It's still going, eh?
You know what you're still listening to.
Yeah, I turned it off and then I turned it back on. Yeah.
A few times I've slipped on that.
Oh, really?
Kept it on and you know.
SubhanAllah, you go home and it's still streaming.
Right, man. You just been so motivated, you forgot your coffee. Man.
Forgot about everything. SubhanAllah. Once I'm talking, khalas, you can't get me to stop. You know?
You don't actually depend on it.
SubhanAllah. But I like depending on it. It's fine. It's I don't mind it. Pretty good. All right. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Let's see. Volume 2. All right, we'll give everyone a couple of minutes. Just grab a snack, and we'll get started in maybe 5 minutes. All right, inshallah, in 1 more minute, and we'll just resume. We'll go on for about 15 minutes, 20 or so, and then we should be good to go. All right. Just going to take another sip of my coffee. Anybody here is a caffeine addict, coffee addicts? Anybody? You know what? I respect the honesty, because a lot of people say, no, I don't need it. I'm like, bro, I need you. You know? And this is my first coffee all day. And oh my God, it tastes so good. I think if it wasn't for caffeine, none of this presentation would have been possible, because it would have never been put together. So now that we've talked about the historical aspects, the key agreements that took place, Zionism, how it started, and how they got themselves the land of Palestine. We looked at the map of how the Palestinian land has been deteriorating, and Israel's been taking over more and more land through settler colonialism. The question is now, especially in the past 20 months or so, it has gone especially bad. And I'm not going to go through these in detail. This is a separate presentation about everything since 2023. But long story short, the story in the last 20 or so months has literally been destruction, humanitarian crisis, war crimes. We've seen the official numbers, 50,000 Palestinian deaths, 60,000 Palestinian deaths. Now it's become something that we're accustomed to. Meanwhile, when you look at medical journals and experts, they say the number is in the hundreds of thousands. And that's a conservative estimate of the amount of Palestinians who have actually been killed. You look at the infrastructure whereby 80% of Gaza has been completely decimated, completely annihilated. Not by accident, but as a military tactic. We've seen healthcare practitioners being kidnapped, tortured, killed, hospitals invaded and raided and bombed, journalists, over 200, now the number is closer to 300 journalists who have been targeted and assassinated. And speaking of the IDF, who knows what the IDF stands for? Yes. Israeli Defense Forces, right? They like to put the word defense in it. Remember the 50,000 Irgun, Lehi, and Hajana terrorists that Great Britain told the League of Nations to deal with before you do your partition and kill tens of thousands of people? You know who those 50,000 terrorists became?
Yes.
The IDF. The Jewish agency became the government of Israel, and the Hajana, the Irgun, the Lehi, the other terrorist militias, all became the IDF in 1948. So now the question is everything doom and gloom? What now? So it brings the topic directly to the one thing we can actually do as individuals, as a collective. Activism. For another shirt, what size is this? This is X large. Okay. You know what? X large. All right, look, we got a small and we got an X large. We don't have anything in the middle, apparently. You're either starving or you're not starving. Ooh. Who can define activism for me? A proper definition of activism.
Activism comes from act upon something, act upon it. You have a target, you act upon it.
You're working as an organized manner.
Okay, you know what? I'm gonna take that. Small or X large? X large. There you go. So now the only one left is for a child. So I guess if you're a child or you have children, or if you like to rock super slim fit shirts. Activism, simply put, it's taking action in order to bring about social, economic, political, environmental, or some other change, right? Does it work? This has been the topic of conversation for years. But in the past 20 months, for example, in my province of Nova Scotia in Canada, we've been going out for rallies and protests week in and week out. We could have hundreds of people. We will have thousands of people. Does activism work? There's different forms of activism. There's donating towards causes to help our brothers and sisters in Palestine. There's posting on social media, which I'm sure we've all been doing. Attending rallies, protests, the student encampments that have resulted in divestment. BDS, boycotts, divestments, sanctions, email campaigns, pressure campaigns towards your elected officials. But has it worked? By show of hands, who thinks it has not worked? It has not worked.
Definitely there's a bigger form of awareness for sure.
Yeah, so you're going to be in the second group then. It didn't work. You can be honest. And you won't be wrong either. Who thinks it did work?
From awareness perspective.
Some people are saying in the middle.
Well, to an extent.
To an extent. I would say you're both right. It just depends on your definition of, is it working? Is what working? What is your ultimate goal? If your goal is, did the genocide stop? No. Then it didn't work. If your goal is, I want to see a free Palestine now, is Palestine no longer occupied? No. So it didn't work. It all depends on our definition. If by working, we mean, are we seeing changes that we haven't seen before? Are we moving in a direction, building momentum that is unprecedented? What is the trajectory of the Palestinian activism movement? If that is the metric we're looking at, then it has 100% worked. But how can we substantiate that claim? Because even for me, I will hear this constantly when I speak at rallies, when I do events. People will say, what's the point? You've been shouting for 20 months and nothing happened. Why bother?
It's not in our hands. It's upon us to do what we can do. And I think also
Yes.
we see a change in people, individuals. Like I can tell you that my priorities changed as an individual. And my family and our dynamics in our house changed.
Yes.
So, and I think that's where it starts. You start with the individual, start in the home, you start with the kids, you start with the family. And from there it will, spread from there.
Exactly. It all depends on your definition of change and working. So let's look at some of these global results. More than half of the states in the United States of America have banned BDS of Israel. Not of America. You can boycott US products in America. You just cannot boycott Israeli products in most states. Let me ask you this. If the government has to legislate something to stop you from doing it, does that mean they're afraid of its impact?
Of course.
Yes. BDS would not be made illegal in countless states if they weren't afraid of the boycotts and the divestments. Social media censorships. How many people here have posted on social media, shared the news of the genocide, journalists being murdered and massacred, etc.? And how many people here have experienced shadow banning? Suddenly, you go from getting thousands of views to less than 100. Suddenly, posts are being taken down. Suddenly, your favorite content creator who's been informing you about this genocide, their account deleted or killed, targeted if they live in Gaza. Meta would not be censoring your voices if they weren't afraid of the impact. The main reason TikTok was about to be banned in the United States, according to US politicians, because they couldn't control the news about Palestine on TikTok. They said, we are losing the war in TikTok. We are losing the narrative. TikTok refuses to censor Palestinian voices, so we have to ban it. And then they did for one day. And then it came back. And when it came back, I can tell you, my Palestinian content is not reaching as many people as it used to, which means TikTok probably gave in and decided to make some changes in order to avoid being banned. Loss of jobs. How many people have spoken up against the genocide? Simply saying, guys, killing men, women, and children is wrong. And they've been labeled anti-Semitic and they lost their jobs. From professors to medical practitioners. Yes. How many arrests, green card holders, students, US citizens just attending rallies and protests, students peacefully doing encampments, arrested. Old men, women, many of them holding the highest degrees, masters and PhDs. They go to a rally, they go to a protest, 83 years old, just recently in the UK, and getting arrested. What was that?
She was vicar, she's a clergyman.
Yes, yes.
For supporting Palestine Action.
Which is now a terrorist organization.
And then, and just with peacefully holding a sign saying we support Palestine Action.
Oppressing your own population for the safety of a foreign nation.
Well, it's even the same with, so NECAP, the Irish band.
Yes.
And then they were obviously censored at Glastonbury.
What was that infamous chant? I forget.
Yes. And then, but that wasn't NECAP, that was
The other one, yes.
But then NECAP it were in court facing charges. They asked for proceedings to be conducted in Irish, which until February 2025 was a banned language in the UK. And that was to depossess the Irish of their lands and their rights and freedoms from 1750-something.
Back with the British colonized Ireland.
They requested that the hearing be held in Irish or that they have interpreters. They just couldn't find an Irish interpreter for them as well. And Jeremy Corbyn, a British politician of ours who's been campaigning for Palestine, you know, you just have to see they labelled him anti-Semitic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look what happened to the guy. Look what happened to the guy that Hague. Safan.
What was that?
Safan from the Hague.
Oh, yes, yes. They sanctioned the entire ICC. They sanctioned him. He can't even access his emails. But we're going to get to that, actually. So when we say it doesn't work, they wouldn't be censoring you, arresting, firing people if they weren't afraid of the impact. When the genocide started, not the 70 years of genocide, but the last 20 months of genocide specifically, politicians were not even allowed to say the word humanitarian pause. They were not allowed to say the words ceasefire. They were not allowed. And a few times, I'm from Canada, we had Justin Trudeau, the former prime minister, and he almost said free ceasefire during one of the interviews with the media. And that man stumbled so quick to take back all those words and started making up new words to cover up for the word he almost said, ceasefire, because he wasn't allowed to say it. They were not allowed to say ceasefire. They weren't allowed to say humanitarian pause. They weren't allowed to say humanitarian aid corridor. Rallies and protests kept taking place. People did not stay silent. They stayed vocal. They pressured their politicians. So it went to a humanitarian aid. And then many months later, it became ceasefire. And then many months later, they started talking about the useless two-state solution, but they just felt like they had to say something because the people got very loud. The change in language represents how the population is reacting to that situation. Now this is old news, but we cannot ignore this. Any South Africans here? Oh, we got 2 South Africans? MashaAllah, nice. Even though we know everything that's been happening from the ICJ and the ICC may not be legally binding, irrelevant. If you told me as a Palestinian, who my grandfather was part of the Nakba, who was kicked out of his home in 1948 and forcefully taken to Gaza, that in about 77 years, Israel is actually in the highest UN courts, they will be convicted of plausibly committing genocide. If you told me that 21 months ago, 22 months ago, before October 7th, I would have said, you are out of your mind. These are the courts that are put in place to protect colonizers. But every now and then, they get something right. So when the ICJ found Israel plausibly committing genocide, essentially guilty, that was unfathomable 2 years ago. But what made that possible? Global activism, advocacy, and South Africa deciding we are going to take a stand.
But also too, you know, the social media and so forth, the evidence is just too overwhelming.
Everything was documented. Everything. It's the only genocide that has been broadcasted live and in HD. And we're actually going to get to that point. But then that's not where it ended. The International Court of Justice, Amnesty International, B'Tselem and other human rights organizations accused Israel of committing apartheid and occupation. Whoa. Like for the ICJ to admit, yes, we see sufficient evidence that this could be deemed as apartheid and an illegal occupation. And then, to make matters worse, this thing called the International Criminal Court had been threatening this for months, actually issued arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Gallant. If you told me this as a Palestinian 2 years ago, I would have said, bro, you need to go to rehab because you're off your meds. There's no way that's going to happen. Again, international law is only as strong as the nations willing to enforce it. But right now, there might be nations not willing to enforce it. But what about the next generation that no longer views Israel as this beacon of freedom and democracy, but sees it for what it is, a settler colonial state that has committed genocide and ethnic cleansing and apartheid? And suddenly, they decide, we are enforcing this legal verdict. Forget the courts. Let's go back to BDS. If you told me 2 years ago that one of the largest companies in the world, McDonald's, was going to have an absolute meltdown over its quarterly earnings, I would not have believed you. Who knows what McDonald's did after October 7th that caused the global boycotts of McDonald's? Yes, the Israeli branches of McDonald's gave free food to all the IDF soldiers who were invading Gaza and killing Palestinians. So what did the global Palestinian movement say? McDonald's, we're about to introduce you to BDS. We're not purchasing your products anymore. In a matter of months, McDonald's, especially globally, but more specifically in the Middle Eastern region, they were expected to grow by 5.5%. They only grew by 0.7%. Their quarterly earnings were released, and they missed their quarterly targets. I didn't believe this headline. I had to look it up multiple times in multiple articles. When they missed their quarter one targets and their stock dropped by 11%, the CEO ran faster than Usain Bolt. The man almost won all the sprinting medals and said, guys, it wasn't me. I'm a great CEO. It's those darn boycotts. It's not my fault we didn't grow when we missed our targets. It's the boycotts and the misinformation because of Gaza. They panicked. And what was the cause of this panic? Boycotts. So what did McDonald's do? Well, like a good corporation, they're not going to admit that, hey, we made a mistake. Our branch in Israel shouldn't have fed genocide enablers and genociders free meals. But what they said is, what we're going to do is something a little more subtle because, we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. We're just going to buy back all 225 franchises we have in Israel. We don't want to deal with this again. 225, that's a lot. Every other block? It's crazy.
But that's a really important question, because what's the biggest export from Israel? Yeah.
The biggest export from Israel? Military technology, isn't it? What's the biggest export in Israel?
Diamonds.
But it was.
Oh, from...
What else done?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
But they don't have any diamond mines.
Mm.
They don't have any diamond mines. There's no diamonds that,
That from the Congo?
yes.
Yes.
You've got to do all those dots in. That's why there's 225 countries. I'm not into diamonds.
Is there a money laundering scheme going on? No comment. True.
I think it's part of an economic model.
Okay. All right. The other example, Starbucks. Starbucks sued its employees' union when they posted about Palestine. Starbucks doesn't care about Palestine, but they wanted to destroy their union. And when the union ended up posting in support of Palestinian solidarity, Starbucks sued their union. So the world said, bet, you're going to use the Palestine and the genocide that's happening to go after the union? All right, we're going to boycott you too. And Starbucks lost almost $11 billion in market value. They replaced their CEO. They addressed the boycott, said it's all happening because of misinformation. We're not taking a side. And they started panicking. And this has been happening at universities who have been forced to divest, businesses who had plans to open branches in Israel and they had to pull back. All of that because of BDS. Israel, their economy has taken a huge hit because now all they're doing is genociding Palestinians. All the money is going towards war. Their businesses are closing it at an exponentially high rate. A lot of immigration out of Israel is happening because they're afraid of Iran and this and that, so much so that Israel had to stop and restrict travel. Their military, although they won't admit it, has taken massive damages. And their main saving grace is their tech industry and the US constantly writing checks for tens of billions of dollars. But for how long? The brother mentioned this clearly as well. Everything was so documented that Israeli soldiers were told, stop posting or stop traveling because we cannot guarantee your safety. ICJ accused us of genocide. Our prime minister has a warrant out for his arrest. We cannot guarantee your safety if you travel to certain countries. And before I conclude, the change in narratives. If you told me 2 years ago that Candace Owens was going to be anti, or at the very least, highly critical of Israel, I would have laughed. I would have said, you should have been a stand-up comedian. If you told me Tucker Carlson was going to hold Ted Cruz's feet to the fire and question him and grill him on Israel and the Bible, I would have said, bro, you're out of your depth. Piers Morgan, I mean, he only says what he's allowed to say, so we're not even gonna. But at least he started pushing back when he was told he was allowed to and his job was secure. Megan Rice, a well-known TikToker. The amount of people who are anti-Islam, Islamophobes, bigots, had or knew nothing about Islam, after seeing what happened in Gaza, they started wanting to learn more about Islam. What is this religion whereby you are being genocided and all you are saying is, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Yes, 6 of my kids are dead. They've been murdered. But it's the will of God. We all belong to God, and to Him we shall return. What is causing this immense faith? So finally, and these are just someone once asked me, can you give us some sources of good information about Palestine, who to listen to and who to watch? And I just listed out a few reliable voices. Now here's my question. How long is it gonna take? Okay, you told me we're in the right direction. When is it going to be over? Wish I knew. But if we looked at history, it's not a matter of if Palestine will be free, it's when. The question is, will it be free because of your actions or despite of your actions or inaction? Why can I say this? Where's the Irish? How long was Ireland colonized by the British? For this shirt, I think this one's going to fit you. How long was Ireland? 700 years. Very good. 793, actually. 793 years. And when you look at everything that they have done to the Irish, it is a spitting image of what is happening to Palestine. Colonized for centuries, settler colonialism, being marginalized and treated like second-class citizens, almost an apartheid regime, Gaelic being outlawed, your identity being criminalized, military presence, militarized checkpoints, a discriminatory legal system for colonizers and those colonized, partition to control the land, peaceful protests and hunger strikes by the colonized being vilified, criminalized, and the response to that is violence. Peacefully protesting your occupation only to be either beat up or killed for it. But at the end of the day, a combination of independence and resistance movements who were also framed as terrorists because they simply wanted their independence, and eventually a free Ireland, or Republic of Ireland, in 1922, and then 1949 became the Republic of Ireland. South Africa. 46 years of apartheid in South Africa. Exact same thing. Why are South Africans and the Irish some of the most vocal supporters of Palestine? Because they see what Israel is doing to Palestine as exactly what has happened to them. South Africa has been the most vocal about the apartheid happening in Palestine by the Israelis. The discriminatory legal system, whites versus non-whites. You have the restriction of movements. You have the land theft. You have the denial of their political rights. You're not equal human beings in an apartheid society. And of course, resistance groups, from peaceful resistance to armed resistance, whatever it takes to eventually get your independence. And most importantly, BDS. That is why Israel is fearful of BDS, because they saw how it dismantled the apartheid regime in South Africa. And that is why they're cracking down on it for Palestine. So I leave you with this. The question becomes, what are you going to do? We talked about how this all started. We talked about what is happening whereby people are pushing back. The question is, are you going to be part of the solution? Will you take actions resulting in the inevitable freeing of Palestine? Or will it simply happen without you and leave you in the footnotes of history? And with that being said, of course, I will leave everyone with this QR code, which is essentially the same QR code that is on your brochures. So what we are doing as well is we are fundraising this weekend, yesterday, today, and tomorrow for our projects in Gaza to continue providing clean water to continue providing food and medical surgeries, whether it's vision care, dental care, or actual surgeries for children, whether it's in the Gaza Strip or Gazan evacuees in Egypt. And what I'll do is I'll end off with a 1-minute video before we wrap it up. Let's see if the volume's on. Oh, it is not. Do we have the remote? Just put the mic on it? You know, I could probably do that. But then it won't show, right? I have to hold it like this. Let's try. So mine is on full. So I think we just have to make sure. Oh, there we go. Oh, no, it should be. I'm gonna try.
No, because
Oh, it's just not the right one? Oh. Oh, receiver optical. Interesting. I would have to unplug. Can we just keep it in and just remove the audio? All right. It's right here. Yeah. Oh, why wouldn't it open? And just right here. Let's try that. Let's see if this works.
With 2 million
Oh, it actually does. All right, let me put the mic on it. Let's try this.
With 2 million Palestinians still suffering, our humanitarian work is ongoing. From food to
Can you guys hear it? No? Not really? It's coming from here.
distributions,
From right here. Let's try it. You know what? I'm gonna put this on the loudest. Let's see what happens. If the windows crack, wasn't my fault. If this doesn't work, nothing will.
with 2 million Palestinians still suffering, our humanitarian work is ongoing. From food distributions and homes. Vision care
Maybe.
and medical surgeries.
Here on the surgical operations, we're having operations for the children and for those who are not able to reach out for the health support and communication. The infrastructure of health protection has been collapsed for the past 600 days of genocide, and many are not able to reach out for the support. We as Mercy are trying to raise the happiness and the hope in between all of those patients. Your support can save lives of so many. So much.
It's the best we could do. Testing. I think that's better. But with that being said, there we go. That concludes today's long, tiring, hopefully informative presentation. So thank you all for coming, and I will be here for a little longer if you have any questions.
just as a program for this tomorrow also our guest will be giving a presentation, follow-up presentation, so there'll be some, what's it based on tomorrow?
It'll be the global activism, a separate part of global activism, and the Sira.
Yeah. That's at the Wellness Hub. The Wellness Hub from the Cayman Business Hub. Tomorrow from 6:30. We should be starting on time tomorrow, 6:30. So those of us who want to attend that are more than welcome. And those of us who want to fundraise and donate, you can obviously speak to our guests. Thank you very much for attending. And again, we can help ourselves.